Thanks, Gord. Yeah, I guess, so focus of the next 15 or 20 minutes, I'm really going to recap some of the key themes. And I think, the one thing to take into account is there really, as Gord has described, there really is no silver bullet. The focus really, if you look at what some of the leaders are doing, one of the key elements is having an IT application to support this integrated scenario and, help bridge the silos between your sales and your service organization. And I think, you may sit back and look at this and say, okay, well, we have some applications, we have some spreadsheets, and in reality, all organizations do, and it's really the integration of some of these tools that drives the benefit. If we take a look at some of the key challenges we focused on earlier in the presentation, I'll pick up 4 of them. So accurate resource profile. So knowing who your resources are. Obviously, it's a resource-intensive business, and resource in this context, whether it be an employer or subcontractor, and depending on your industry or your segment, obviously other resources can exist, such as equipment or materials. So there is challenge in establishing an accurate profile of those resources. The second thing we'll focus on is related to forecasting and staffing. So that's really where you're seeing the management of the sales pipeline and some of your early forecasting and planning of resources. So if you're waiting to the point that you actually win work to begin the staffing exercise, it's too late, and that's not helping you meet that 8 to 10 day window where, we're seeing the leaders. Finally, an approach to centralized and automated resource management. So this isn't intended to be a fully automated approach, but there is a level and a degree of automation where the tools can suggest best fit resources based on, these resource profiles and forecasting that you've done. So in the next 10 or 15 minutes, I'm going to walk you through a series of demonstrations to indicate how a business application, and in this case, Microsoft Dynamics AX, can assist in resolving some of these challenges. And I'll preface this by just saying, so we at Ideaca actually use this application internally to manage our services organization. So let's take a look at the first scenario, which is, accurate resource profiles. So, it's a key tenet to the success of your organization is knowing not only your employees or your subcontractors. So in this scenario, we're seeing a screenshot of Microsoft Dynamics AX and the resource, what I'll refer to as the resource workbench. So we can see a listing of all the available resources in our organization. One of these key resources, it could be an employee in our organization or a series of employees, but equally important is the ability to manage contractor profiles. And one thing to highlight, in relation to managing your profiles is different types of attributes or different components of a resource are relevant to your organization. So in some organizations, it may be, the fact that we have PNGs on staff for certain work or a certain inspection certificate or a qualified accountant. In other organizations, it may be relative to certifications, safety certifications, or different project experience. So all of these aspects of your resource can be managed in a professional services automation solution like Dynamics AX. So we just follow through. We've highlighted Brooke, so she's one of our resources available for staffing. And if we drill down on the education attributes that she holds, we can see that she's actually a designated accountant from an education perspective. And again, so if I'm in the accounting space or in an implementation scenario and we really need someone to lead that finance engagement, we can quickly see who has these skills. Likewise, another key dimension of staffing from a resource perspective could be prior project experience. So again, from this resource and from our resource workbench, we can begin to see the skills and attributes that each of these employees maintains. I think the key thing to keep in mind, and based on my experience, because I've seen this, it's really striking a balance between maintaining what you require to staff versus having employees track every single skill and attribute that you need. It's not about tracking, everything that an employee's ever done, but it's in tracking the key elements that can support your staffing needs. So I use the example of, who has an engineering certification, who has a given safety certificate. It's not about ensuring that everyone maintains, minutia in a skills profile, because that's where I've seen, in past experience where these things get bogged down. Second scenario related to, this gets into more of the sales pipeline management and forecasting. So, a lot of you probably have CRM systems in place where you're managing forecast and pipeline and tracking opportunities throughout the various stages. At a point in time, it really becomes important, in the life cycle of those opportunities to have an integrated view, not just from a revenue perspective and date of close perspective and who the prospect or customer is, but what staffing requirements and resourcing requirements you're going to need. The screenshot you're seeing in front of you is, a quotation. So this is information that has been integrated with your CRM system and really represents, at a high level, the customer opportunity, the customer name, the properties of the engagement. The key element to focus on relative to the quotation, and if we drill down one further level, this is where we begin to see some of those resource characteristics or attributes. So going back to tracking our resources and subcontractors, this is where it becomes, what skills are we going to need to deliver this work shall we win? As I mentioned earlier, it's too late in the process if you're deciding that once you've won the work. It's really an upfront process from a staffing and resource management perspective where early in the opportunity, and early really is defined by the size of the opportunity and your ability to turn around resources, but identifying as part of the opportunity and the forecast the types of skills, the types of resources you're going to need to engage. It's not about necessarily making hard commitments or soft commitments, but it's having the flexibility to identify within the organization to your resource managers that you're going to have a need at a future date for an engineer, for a ERP implementation expert, for a technical